Here we go. Okay, everybody, we're back again with our weekly chat with author Kevin McAleer. We are going through all the Raymond Chandler novels one by one. We were supposed to do this last Saturday, but he was having technical issues for the internet, so we're now doing it on the following Friday here. Let's dive into this. So our novel for the week, High Window. Kevin, you said you
Sorry.
that's all right.
Coffee. Yeah.
Oh yeah, coffee. I've got my cold brew coffee here as well. I want to make sure make sure our viewers know that every time we're doing this, I've got this drink of something with ice in it. I want to make sure they know it's not part of the drinkometer, and an alcoholic beverage. It's actually just cold brew coffee.
I'm the one that probably would be concerned about, but I'm drinking.
What's your drink of the day whenever you do this?
It's coffee. It's just keep it
okay.
Keep it simple.
All right, very good.
And clean.
Very good. Is that cold brew or is that the warm coffee?
No, that's hot coffee.
Hot coffee. Okay. Okay.
Right.
Anyway, all right. So Kev, tell me what you thought of The High Window. I mean, first of all, tell me I think you've read all these novels before, as far as I understand. When's the last time you read The High Window, and what did you think of it now, the second or third time around, whatever?
I've read all these things, all these novels, except Playback, which is not one I like. That's his last one. His powers were declining. But I've read all of these novels, and several times, just to learn about writing. And High Window, I don't know. But let me just give your viewers an idea of how often I've read these novels. This is what we now have of The High Window. This is what's left of it. That's how often I've read these things. That means a good half dozen times, and referring to them frequently, just in terms of the writing, to see how he pulled off a certain effect, his dialogue, how he keeps the plot moving through dialogue, and also dialogue serving character development, how he does that wonderfully, although you're not noticing it when he's doing it. You are just having a good time with the rat-a-tat-tat repartee, which is particularly the case in The High Window, I would argue. He's firing on all four cylinders. But how he does that, how he isn't just being gratuitous with the jokes. And I talked about one time when he did that with Big Willie Magoon, where he tried to slip in a wisecrack. But he does that very rarely, actually. And he keeps his plots very tight and to the bone. And I thought this was one of those plots that it was a very tightly plotted book, not wobbly at all, like you could maybe argue The Big Sleep was, or Farewell, My Lovely, although that was fairly tight, at least comparison to Big Sleep. So that's my read on it. I think it's a good little mystery, and it's similar to The Big Sleep in terms of they're looking for something, right? It's not a missing person like Rusty Reagan in The Big Sleep. Marlowe was never looking for him, but everyone else seems to have been. They're looking for a coin, and it's called the Brasher doubloon. And the owner is a woman called Elizabeth Bright Murdoch. Bright, the name of her first husband, Horace Bright, who many years earlier had died in either a suicide or an accident through a plunge from a high window, hence the title of the book. And that will come into play later on, this whole notion of this Mr. Bright plunging from the window. A comment on the title. Chandler didn't like the title. he argued for the Brasher doubloon as the title, which in fact was the title of the movie version in 1947, excuse me, with George Montgomery playing the Philip Marlowe role. But Alfred Knopf, or again Blanche, it was, you know, the Knopfs, they were quite an interesting duo. Their publishing house, it was a duo. It was a husband-wife team, and they oversaw all the books. And either Blanche or Alfred or both of them talked Chandler out of the Brasher doubloon, and they went with the high window. In any event, the Brasher doubloon would have been very appropriate. It sounds more like a mystery too, by the way, the Brasher doubloon, because it is really at the center of this mystery where, like most Chandler plots, all kinds of twists and turns and curly cues and backtracks take place. And this is no exception, although I described it as being, I think, relatively tightly plotted. There's no exception to the rule that it's impossible to sum up in 5 or 10 minutes, and I'm not going to attempt to.
Good. Yeah, that title doesn't have any kind of exotic feel to it. Like The Big Sleep, Farewell My Lovely, The Late, they all have a certain poetic intrigue to them. The High Window has got to be one of the more pedestrian titles I've ever heard on a Philip Marlowe novel, let alone any mystery novel.
Yeah.
So I guess you can confirm that it just sounds kind of pedestrian, even to Chandler, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, or you didn't even mention perhaps the most poetic of all the titles, The Long Goodbye. The Little Sister, I suppose, would be another sort of pedestrian title, and I don't think he cared for that much either. I'm not sure. I just got done reading in the interim after I'd finished The High Window, and we weren't able to have this conversation. In the interim, I filled it with a reread of Chandler's letters. And I've mentioned them already, but if anyone wants to have a great read and great insight into Chandler, his life, his creative art, Philip Marlowe, and the times that he was living in, that is to say, Chandler, read his letters. He's as funny and witty and incisive as he is in his novels. In any event, yeah, I don't think that he was too keen on the title of The Little Sister either. I think he was sort of talked into that one. Not sure about that.
Well, another interesting aspect of the title is you really, when you're coming to this novel for the first time, which was what I was doing. It was my first time reading it or even knowing about it a couple of weeks ago. I had no idea why it was called The High Window, because you don't get the high window aspect until like the last quarter of the novel. So you're sitting there, you're going, well, this is a rather pedestrian title, and you're reading and you're trying to figure out, where does the high window aspect come in?
Not only pedestrian, but completely irrelevant. Where's the
yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a dog. I think it's a dog of a title. I was never quite fond of it myself, even if I learned to love the novel.
I did so I was so baffled by the whole thing that I did a Wikipedia search, and it showed that the original edition of it showed a guy falling from a window in terror, and it's like, so you realize if I kind of wish that I had the original edition so I could see that there's actually a guy that's going to fall out of a high window and it's coming up at some point. But I didn't know that, because here's my cover. This is the cover I have.
Totally generic.
So I had no idea what is the high window. So I guess there's an intrigue in there in not knowing what the heck this is.
Trying to figure what the darn title means. Yeah, you don't know what The Big Sleep means either.
Until the very end.
Yeah, until the very, very, very end, till the second to last paragraph.
Yeah.
And because I never quite knew that as a kid. You know, you heard about The Big Sleep, the movie primarily, and I never knew what that was. Actually, I never figured out it was death. Because actually, there's an interesting story about that title. It wasn't something in the slang at the time that Chandler was writing that he seized upon and thought, oh, this would be a cool title. Chandler, in fact, invented that phrase, the big sleep, for death. He said he invented it. Now, he said it may have been out there somewhere, and he may have heard it and then just through osmosis, then gave it back as the title of his first novel. But this is in his letters again, he writes about this, because later on, Eugene O'Neill, was it in The Iceman Cometh? I'm not sure. But he uses the term the big sleep in one of his plays. And he uses it as if it's just, the kind of lingo that cons or ex-cons use, the big sleep, death. And Chandler wrote one of his correspondence. And by the way, I don't know if it was The Iceman Cometh where this phrase was used, but Chandler hated The Iceman Cometh. He thought it was a joke. By the way, I just want to say that. This is not an editorial on my part, but just interesting. He had complete contempt for it. He didn't care for O'Neill at all. Little side note. And he said, well, O'Neill's treating this as though it's part of the American slang. I made it up. I made it up in 1939. And this goes into Chandler's view of how slang should be used. This is very interesting. He said, you shouldn't use slang of the moment. You should try to avoid that because it's here one day and gone tomorrow. And by the time you've written in your manuscript, and by the time your book comes out, a year later, it takes a while to get books to press and then published. This slang is so 5 minutes ago, to use a slang phrase. And he said the only slang that's worth using is slang that has really established itself in the vernacular, or slang you make up. And he does a lot of that making up of slang, because I run across stuff in his books like, where did that come from? Okay, it must be a Chandlerism. And it's pretty cute, pretty nifty sometimes. Anyway,
okay,
enough of that. I don't even know how I got on that topic. But big sleep, yeah.
Well, this is all discussing this title and the various other titles. I mean, every time we make one of these videos, we have a little sideline on a little topic and so I'm glad we're covering the titles. Are there any other titles of Chandler that are of interest before we move on to the book itself?
Okay. Well, I don't know. What is your favorite? My favorite title is Farewell, My Lovely. The one he copped from the Broadway song, apparently, according to Wikipedia. And that was his favorite title too. And in his letters, again, I'll be citing the letters a lot because they're fresh in mind. I read them last week. He said that a lot of his fans agreed with him that Farewell, My Lovely that's the title.
Okay,
because it's so not on the nose in terms of a mystery title. Farewell, My Lovely. Very interesting, and you wonder, and actually I still have not to this day figured out what lovely we're saying farewell to in that. Are we saying farewell to Velma, that she has left this identity behind? Farewell, my lovely little showgirl. Or is it Velma at the end where she shoots herself in the heart? Farewell, my lovely. Or is it farewell, my lovely, what would it be? And it's not clear.
Okay, well, Kev, so we have, I just want to make sure I'm clear on the titles of all 7 of these. The Big Sleep, #1, Farewell, My Lovely, The High Window, The Lady in the Lake. And then what's the next one after The Lady in the Lake?
The Little Sister.
And after that?
The Long Goodbye.
Oh, and then you got Playback. Playback's probably the most pedestrian of all of them.
It was based on a screenplay, so yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, listen, I'm glad we're going through all 7 of these. What about the novel itself? Did you get any new insights reading it here again this time around?
Not really, though. Every time I read it, I get better at following the clues because I know how it ends.
Right.
So I can see how Chandler is planting the clues for us, but at the same time trying to cover his tracks a little bit so he doesn't make it so easy for us. And he never makes it easy for us. So I would just argue, hey, Chandler, just plant the clues and don't cover your tracks. It's hard enough. Because even when I get to the end, and like this one, it's like I couldn't quite connect all the dots. I couldn't quite connect all the dots in terms of character motivation and in terms of how or when would they have done that. But mostly the character motivation. Like, for example, when Leslie Murdoch, who is the son of this Elizabeth Bright Murdoch, who has lost the coin, and it turns out that Leslie, her son, sort of an ineffectual guy, little, kind of a innocuous rich boy, he had actually taken the coin, this expensive coin. It was in his stepfather's, Elizabeth Bright Murdoch's second husband, this Murdoch fellow who died, that he had taken this collection of his stepfather, his dead stepfather, and he had taken it to this fellow called Louis Vanier to make a copy of it, or make copies of it, not clear on that, through the use of dental plaster or something that they make gold inlays with. And they knew a guy who was going to be willing to do this. And then they wanted to make some money because apparently this Leslie Murdoch was in deep debt to a fellow by the name of Alex Morney, right? Alex Morney. Every novel, Chandler has a hoodlum, a gangster, right? And this is our gangster of the hour, Mr. Alex Morney. And he is the least sympathetic of the three gangsters that we've encountered thus far, I would argue. First, Eddie Mars in Big Sleep, and then Laird Brunette in Farewell My Lovely. And now we have this Alex Morney guy, who's actually not a full-time professional hood. He's an ex-actor, an ex-third-rate actor. And he doesn't have the charisma. He doesn't have the panache. He's just, a guy playing a role. He's an actor. And so he's the least sympathetic, I would argue, and also through the eyes of Marlowe. Anyway, so this Leslie Murdoch steals the coin. And what I was getting to is that at one point, Leslie, he kills this fellow Louis Vanier, with whom he was going to do this counterfeiting job. After Vanier has killed a couple people, and it just seems implausible, or I can't quite connect the motivational dots on why this ineffectual, Leslie Murdoch would undertake such, heroic action, killing this guy, Louis Vanier, after actually the whole thing has been seemingly resolved. The coin has been returned. The Vanier has done his thing. He's killed the two people who might reveal the plot. Stuff like that. And I don't want to get too deep into it. I'm already deep enough. But that's what I'm talking about, how I even if I've read this for the 6th, 7th, 8th time, there's certain things I just can't resolve in my mind.
Well, Kev, my understanding of why Leslie killed Vanier is because he found out about this blackmail that Vanier had been doing on his mother, $500 a month over the last 10 years to keep it quiet about what she apparently did regarding the high window. Apparently.
Well, okay, good.
Yeah.
We'll get to that because that's basically the point of the whole story. This, it's the punchline. But how did he find that out? And why didn't he find it out earlier? This has been going on for 11 years.
Because he confronted Vanier about the doubloon, I suppose, and Vanier told him, "Hey, I'm going to reveal this whole thing about your mother if you don't go along with my doubloon project." And so
all right.
Yeah, and Chandler builds up this Leslie Murdoch as kind of a mama's boy. His mom's a very unattractive character, but he's completely
but a hilarious one. I mean, really, really
a hilarious character.
She's got her port wine for her asthma. She belches, you know, in front of Marlowe, doesn't offer him any. I mean, there's a great line of Marlowe the first time they meet. I mean, the opening scene is fantastic. He drives out to Pasadena, and we all know, if we've grown up in LA, Pasadena and San Marino and environs, it gets extremely hot. And he's talking about how hot it is out there, and he goes in there, and she's sitting in a back room, and she's drinking, you know, port wine. Got the bottle there on the table, and she said, "I'm not offering you any because I'm using it to help my medical condition. I have asthma." And Marlo says something about, you know, "I don't like drinking port in hot weather, but it's nice when they let you refuse it." And she just keeps drinking and drinking. And at one point, he says, "I crossed my legs. I hope that wouldn't hurt her asthma." And so she's a very funny character, you know. She's an alcoholic, obviously. She's big and burly. She's not at all charming, and it's a good confrontation between these two very strong personalities, Marlowe and Mrs. Murdoch.
Well, you know, speaking of this interesting, intricate plot and these very intriguing characters, and colorful characters, I should say. What about the movie version? Who plays these characters? You must. I haven't seen it.
Yeah, it's not supposed to. It's supposed to be a not very good movie.
Well, I heard that there was another movie based on this called A Time to Kill, a different title, another version. I saw that in the Wikipedia entry. Are you familiar with this movie, A Time to Kill, or no?
I've seen none of the movies based on The High Window. No.
No desire?
Maybe, yeah, but it's hard to come by, you know. You can't just get them on YouTube.
I will tell you, the hardest novel to get for me was The High Window. You know, I went on Amazon and I looked at I put in The High Window, and the only place out of all the titles of Chandler, there's multiple versions you could buy. The only way I could get The High Window was to buy this 4-volume set that had it included in here. There was no separate version of The High Window.
Oh, and you got 3 repeats of books you already had.
2 of them were repeats, but I did it just. That's how dedicated I am to these sessions with you. I got the whole thing.
Good man, you should. Yeah, I appreciate that. But you're only doing yourself a favor, because I think The High Window really is the sleeper of the 7 novels, and it doesn't get as much press as the others. For example, The Little Sister has just as weak a title, but that's a Boffo novel, because it takes place in the Hollywood milieu. Because at that point, Chandler had been working in Hollywood for about 5 years, ever since Double Indemnity. And he had a real cynical eye he was bringing to the whole Hollywood environment. And that's reflected in The Little Sister. So that's a lot of fun. And I think that's a popular one with a lot of even, you know, very, expert Chandler types.
Well, let me ask you this. Last week, or by now it's 2 weeks ago, you had said you're looking forward to reading The High Window again because you wanted to see if it's one of those sleeper novels that's better than most people think and might be ranked up. Where would you rank The High Window in his 7 novels?
Well, I don't know.
Is it in the top 3, or is it in the bottom 4?
I like it better than The Lady in the Lake, although we'll be reading Lady in the Lake next week, and maybe that will change, you know. I don't like it better than Farewell, My Lovely. I don't like it better than The Big Sleep. I don't like it better than The Little Sister, but I might like it better than The Long Goodbye. Although Long Goodbye is a classic, but I'll explain when we get to Long Goodbye maybe why that's not among my favorites.
Okay.
So there you have it. It's about 4 or 5 on the list of the 7. But I will tell you what I really do appreciate about The High Window. I've already alluded to it. The dialogue is crackerjack. And that is what Chandler said, again, citing his letters. I'm not just pulling this out of the air, folks. He said this on numerous occasions in his correspondence. The only thing he really cared about when he got right down to it in writing his novels was the dialogue. He said he loved the dialogue. He said he loved having just he just had two people, you know, as he put it, snotting each other across Marlowe's desk. And one of those two people, of course, being Marlowe. And I have an example of that. I'd like to read it to you now. It's rather extended. It's about a page, so if you'll just be patient. But this is early on. This is after Marlowe has just got done snotting across the coffee table with the bottle of port on it with Mrs. Murdoch. And then very similar to The Big Sleep, as soon as he leaves, then he's accosted by a family member, namely her son, this Leslie that we've been talking about, as he was accosted by Vivian Sternwood as soon as he got done talking to her father, right? So it's a similar, you can see the similar patterns emerging in how Chandler spins a tale. Anyway, Leslie accosts him in his office. So on Marlowe's own turf, which is a mistake to begin with if you're going to be in his face. So anyway, this, as I say, this goes, it's a page, but bear with me, it's worthwhile. This is an example of the kind of really slam bam dialogue that I really appreciate in Chandler, and that he said he lived for. So here's Leslie. He comes into the office. He looked me over without haste and without much pleasure. He blew some smoke delicately and spoke through it with a faint sneer. "You're Marlowe?" I nodded. "I'm a little disappointed," he said. "I rather expected something with dirty fingernails." "Come inside," I said, "and you can be witty sitting down." Anyway, he has Leslie come in. It's a long paragraph. I won't read it, but Leslie is taking his time. He takes out his cigarette. He puts it in his holder, lights a match, you know, reclines in the chair, crosses his legs, and Marlowe says, "All set? Pulse and respiration normal? You wouldn't like a cold towel on your head or anything?" He didn't curl his lip because it had been curled when he came in. "A private detective," he said. "I never met one. A shifty business, one gathers. Keyhole peeping, raking up scandal, that sort of thing." "You here on business?" I asked him, "or just slumming?" "The name is Murdoch. That probably means a little something to you." "You certainly made nice time over here," I said, and started to fill a pipe. He watched me fill the pipe. He said slowly, "I understand my mother has employed you on a job of some sort. She has given you a check." I finished filling the pipe, put a match to it, got it drawing, and leaned back to blow smoke over my right shoulder towards the open window. I didn't say anything. He leaned forward a little more and said earnestly, "I know being cagey is all part of your trade, but I am not guessing. A little worm told me, a simple garden worm, often trod on, but still somehow surviving, like myself. I happen to be not far behind you. Does that help to clear things up?" "Yeah," I said, supposing it made any difference to me. "You are hired to find my wife, I gather." I made a snorting sound and grinned at him over the pipe bowl. "Marlowe," he said, even more earnestly, "I'll try hard, but I don't think I'm going to like you." "I'm screaming," I said, with rage and pain. "And if you will pardon a homely phrase, your tough guy act stinks. Coming from you, that's bitter." Okay, so just a taste of it. There are no hilarious lines there, but it's just this constant rat-a-tat-tat one-upsmanship, which is classic Marlowe dialogue.
You told me before that Chandler was an admirer of Hemingway, and Hemingway is known for that similar kind of dialogue.
Yes,
Was he influenced by Hemingway in this sense?
I think so. I imagine so.
Okay.
And it's implicit. You can read between the lines, and it's very Hemingway-esque, because Hemingway's dialogue, as you know, it's not realistic dialogue. It's not really how people speak, you know? But you just get into a certain rhythm with Hemingway, this laconic sort of boom, 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 boom rhythm, and you go with it. It's beautiful at times,
It's
and
poetic.
that's yeah. And no one really speaks this way, you know. If you're going to have two people across the desk with one another, they'd be grunting at each other like cavemen. You know, if there's that much animosity between the two. But they're very clever. You know, extraordinarily so, and the wit is just uh, flying across the table. That wouldn't ordinarily be the case, right? You might have a witty line or two, but the constant witticisms, no. So it's very unrealistic that way. But uh, but who said that a Chandler novel has to be realistic, capital R? It's not. You can't possibly imagine that all these things would happen. This concatenation of events would take place within the space of what, 3 or 4 days? It doesn't happen that way. These things might take place over several weeks or months or years even.
Yeah, I've noticed that it seems like you've got a lot of stuff happening over a long period of time, but then when you get to the end of the novel, you realize you've only had a few days that you've been.
Right. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. And one more thing about the passage you just read that's very interesting to me as a first-time reader of Chandler. All the times that people are smoking, including Marlowe. Uh,
Sure.
we talked about the profanity. We did the profanity meter. We did
The
the drinkometer. What about the
sigometer.
smokometer?
It would be off the scale. You couldn't.
Well,
Every
I
page.
actually,
It's
Kev,
like a film noir movie. They're always lighting up. They're always lighting up. It's part of the whole pose to be a cool detective or to be a dangerous femme fatale. You know, you light the cig or you pull up a cigarette and then the guy comes with his lighter and lights it for you. It's all part of
the culture.
the cliched gestures that they were just regurgitating,
Well,
and
Kev,
it's similar in the book.
I took it upon myself to denote every reference to smoking for a
Okay,
smokometer. So let me
take it
give you the
away.
smoke. Yeah. First of all, he switches around. I'm talking about the Marlowe character. I'm not talking about all the other characters and how many times they smoke, but the amount of times that Marlowe smoked in this novel. First of all, he smokes a cigarette sometimes, a cigar sometimes, and a pipe sometimes.
Yes.
All three of those are in play. And there were 4 definitive times that he smoked and 10 maybe times, because 10 different times I read something where he'd say, I took out a cigarette and rolled it between my fingers. Or I took out a cigarette and held it for a while. And
Or he puts it in his hat brim like he does with Mrs. Murdoch because he wants to be careful not to hurt her asthma.
so 10 different times he pulls out something to smoke, but he doesn't necessarily tell us that he lit it up and smoked it. Only 4 times do we definitively have him smoking, and 10 maybes. So that's about 14 times.
Well, you see, like in the film noir pictures, it's a prop. It's a
It's
prop
just
to
a
man.
prop. You don't always smoke it. You take it out and roll it in your
You
fingers.
play with it. You hit your mark as the tough talking, hard boiled detective with the cig in between your lips or waving around in your fingers. It's a prop.
Very good. Now, Kev, we've got enough time. We've got about 20 minutes left, but I just wanted to talk about the characters. So we've covered the Mrs. Murdoch. We've covered the Leslie Murdoch character. We haven't talked too much about Vanier, the villain, but one of the other interesting characters is Merle.
Yeah, we must talk about her because actually that's where the dramatic center of the book lies with her and Marlowe's relationship to her.
And she is the one for whom he's the chivalrous knight. In fact, it says in here he was a Sir Galahad of the something or other of
Uh, a shop soiled Galahad. And
Yes.
I quoted that in one of our earlier videos, not knowing where that was from, but then I read it, I realized, oh, it's from The High Window. And the person who says that is Carl Moss, who is the physician who attends to Merle Davis, who, by the way, is the secretary. Merle Davis is the kind of mousy secretary of this very dominating figure, Elizabeth Bright Murdoch. And they have a very strange relationship. She bullies her. Murdoch bullies Merle in her capacity as secretary and otherwise, it seems. But at the same time, she's her protector, you know. She takes care of her, she holds her in her arms, apparently. And so it's a funny relationship. And that's part of the story. What is this relationship and how did it get this way? What's going on here? That's also a question that Marlowe has that he wants to answer.
Well, we've spoken about the fact that Marlowe is a chivalrous character, kind of like a knight from the Middle Ages, a knight errant going on these different adventures and wanderings. And we've had references, either explicit or implicit, of him as a knight of the Middle Ages. This is the first one that's been the most explicit, the Galahad reference. So, and he is a Galahad to Merle because he recognizes how she's been manipulated by Elizabeth Murdoch, who apparently killed her own husband, but is trying to place the blame on Merle as a scapegoat because she has mental issues where she's able to be convinced that she's guilty of not only killing Mr. Murdoch, but of killing Vanier.
She imagines that she has actually killed Vanier, and that's when she comes to Marlowe's place and says, I killed Vanier, and Marlowe doesn't believe it, and he goes to Vanier's place, and he can't believe that she did that because, for one thing, the gun that she had, it had like the wrong caliber slug in the barrel, and she couldn't have fired it, right? It had been
Correct.
given to her by Leslie Murdoch. She had kind of a thing for Leslie, oh, Leslie, and he gave her this little pistol, but he made sure she couldn't fire it by sticking another caliber slug in the breech. And so Marlowe said she couldn't have fired this. So he goes to see Vanier, and he sees Vanier lying there dead. He makes it look like a suicide. He probably knows already that Leslie has killed Vanier, but he makes it look like a suicide because Vanier was a bad apple, and Marlowe wasn't going to necessarily take any pleasure in seeing the guy who killed him, Leslie, go to jail for that murder. So he turns it into he makes it a suicide. He puts his prints on the gun and kind of tidies up, blurs fingerprints and all that kind of thing.
And then he proceeds to protect Merle by pulling her away from Mrs. Murdoch and actually driving her all the way to, I believe, Kansas, to her parents, yes. Wichita.
Yes. We get farther away from Los Angeles in this episode than in any other novel. Yeah, it's hard to imagine Marlowe in Kansas, but there you have it. And it's a very tender description that Chandler gives us, and I will read it. I have it here handy. I knew you'd get to this, and if you hadn't,
okay,
then I would have.
Okay.
I was gone for 10 days. Merle's parents were vague, kind, patient people, living in an old frame house in a quiet, shady street. They cried when I told them as much of the story as I thought they should know. They said they were glad to have her back, and they would take care of her, and they blamed themselves a lot, and I let them do it. When I left, Merle was wearing a bungalow apron and rolling pie crust. She came to the door, wiping her hands on the apron, and kissed me on the mouth. It has to be said that the idea that she had maybe shoved Horace Bright, Elizabeth Bright Murdoch's first husband, through the window. The idea is that he may have made a pass at her in a very direct manner, and that she had been traumatized ever since. And you see this in the novel, that she's afraid that any man will touch her. Marlowe's afraid of getting too close to her in any way, shape, or form because he doesn't want to spook her. So she's obviously been traumatized either by this Horace Bright or earlier, we don't know. Anyway, the fact that she then kisses Marlowe on the mouth, that says something. That is to say, she trusts him. She trusts him at very least, if not, she's developing beyond this trauma she had. So she came to the door, wiping her hands on the apron, and kissed me on the mouth, and began to cry, and ran back into the house, leaving the doorway empty until her mother came into the space with a broad, homely smile on her face to watch me drive away. I had a funny feeling as I saw the house disappear, as though I had written a poem, and it was very good, and I had lost it and would never remember it again. Now, that's a very touching passage, and I don't think Chandler gets more touching than there. Okay, in terms of just his tenderness and elucidating this protector role that Marlowe has assumed for himself. That's his life. That's the life he's chosen for himself, to protect the innocent, to protect those who need help.
Well, that's apropos this image on the front of my book here.
Yeah, but that wouldn't be Merrill there with a backless dress and huddled up against his manly chest. That wouldn't be Merrill. She only came to kiss him on the mouth at the very end, and when she knew he was leaving. But very interesting character, and of course, yeah, this is Galahad writ large in this passage, and he will never be so Galahad-esque as in this novel.
Correct. And very good. And are there any other characters that we should mention that are colorful, prominent characters in this novel that we haven't covered?
Very briefly. I mean, I like this George Anson Phillips. This guy.
Yeah.
This guy is completely incompetent. We won't get into it, but he's a young detective who's trying to get himself out of a jam. He's been brought into this thing by Vanier and Leslie Murdoch to peddle the counterfeit, or is it the real one? I don't know. Anyway, Brasher doubloon to a rare coin dealer. And he's following Marlowe around. He's totally inept. And he eventually gets killed. But he's an interesting character. And another character I like is Mr. Palermo. Across the way. He's an interesting one. He's this Italian guy, very elegant. And he's a mortician, officially. But he's a political power broker in the neighborhood, apparently. And at one point, Marlowe goes in there and has a talk with him because he is the owner of this apartment house where this George Anson Phillips was found dead. And then Marlowe starts to crack wise, and then Mr. Palermo, he says, "Hey, Tony, get in here, Tony." He calls in Tony. Tony's his hard boy, takes care of business when Mr. Palermo needs some business taken care of. And he says, "Get a good look at this Marlowe fellow. Take a good look at him." And Marlowe says something like, "Okay, yeah, Tony, yeah, you get a good look at me, because if you come into my part of town, I'm not a bad boy either. So you can, we can cross swords then." And he's really tough there, Marlowe. He's not going to be intimidated. But I like this Mr. Palermo. He's a very smooth character, and those are two that I like.
Palermo reminds me of a certain book called Executive Hoodlum.
A little bit.
Go ahead, viewers, and check that out on Amazon. We kind of know this guy.
Free plug for Mr. Costello.
Hey, John, if you're out there.
Yeah.
Good to see you.
So, but again, the heart of the story is this relationship between Marlowe and Merle Davis, and how he feels that after he has done right by her, that he has written a poem that he has lost and he's forgotten it. There's a sort of a wistful kind of, this will never happen again in my life, because he's not that kind of guy. He's not going to be doing that every day of the week. He's not going to be driving some girl out to the Midwest to deposit her with her parents. This was really an exceptional event, but the mentality remains throughout the remaining novels.
Why wouldn't he? I kind of had the question, and it may be a naive question, why he didn't just put her on an airplane from LA to the Midwest. I guess they didn't have that kind of travel back then.
Well, Tim, it was expensive. I mean, it wasn't this cheap budget flight stuff we have today.
Mm-hmm.
It was pretty expensive. This is how the elite traveled.
That's what
you have to remember. Yeah. I mean, Marlowe is not a wealthy man. I mean, he's just getting by. He has a cheap little office. He has a cheap little apartment. He doesn't even have a bedroom. He's got a bed that folds up into the wall, right? I mean, but he chooses this life. He chooses it because he likes it. I mean, he has fun at it. He wants to serve a certain purpose. He feels that he's helping people, and he's good at it. He's very, very good at this, and so he has found his calling. So whether he's a wealthy man or not, it doesn't matter to him, it doesn't seem, because he's an honest man and an honorable one.
And he's only making what, $25 a day plus expenses?
Right. You can always, like, to get present day money, you can, if it's like 1940, but you can like multiply that by 10 and basically get the equivalent. So he's making $250
a day.
$250 a day. It's okay. It's decent, right? Decent money.
$250 a day is good. Yeah.
Doing a job you like, love.
With expenses paid. Hey.
With expenses, which Mrs. Murdoch she rebelled against that. She says, "Well, when you're someone as rich as I am, you're used to being overcharged." Another character I like is that little black jockey figure out front of the Murdoch's house. These used to be everywhere. I guess it's considered racist these days, but they used to be everywhere when I was growing up. In the 60s and into the 70s, you'd see these little jockey figures, and they would inevitably be black, and they'd be standing there at the front of a house or in the front yard with like a little ring, where I guess in the old days they would hitch their horses or something. But you still saw these everywhere. So in the 1940s,
he calls it the Negro jockey figure.
Negro jockey, right? And he has like a little conversation with him, like, can you believe this, brother? Yeah, you and me both, brother. Yeah, because he has to go in by the back door. You and me both. Gives a little pat on the head. Here I am again. Yeah, what a nut house. Can you believe it? So he has like this little conversation with the jockey. Like, this is his little
alter ego
friend that he's confiding things to. And that's another little figure I like. These little touches, these little Chandlerian touches are always, that's what make it, Life and literature, they are both a game of inches. The slightest little thing can make something good or not good. The slightest little thing can make something great as opposed to just good. And it's these little touches that I would argue make a Chandler novel,
well,
often great.
A real contemporary of Chandler, who even lived in the same area as Chandler for much of his life, is Thomas Mann. And Thomas Mann had what we call the leitmotif technique, where he would drop in a little telling detail of a character and bring it back from time to time. He had learned that from Wagner with Wagner's leitmotif technique. And we talk about that with Mann, but I think we can talk a little bit about it with Chandler, like the little black Negro that he would pat on the head. And also in a previous novel, I think it was Farewell, My Lovely, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, he had the pink bug that he saw crawling across the desk. And that pink bug reappears like
it appeared later. at the
So
end.
I think he's using a little bit of the leitmotif technique. I know he doesn't really perhaps get credit for that, but I see him doing it.
Yeah, good one. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
because a
another,
leitmotif, we think of it in terms of Germans, you know, Wagner and Thomas Mann,
yeah.
all the epic Germans do it. Uh, or some of the epic type Germans will be using that. I wonder if Goethe used it in his Faust or something. But we don't think of American writers as doing that. But I think Chandler does it to a certain extent, the motif that he brings back.
I'm trying to think. Well, the characters are the things that keep recurring. You know, there's rarely a character who pops up that doesn't recur like 50 pages later, 100 pages later. They're not always gratuitous like Big Willie Magoon in the Long Goodbye, which I cited a couple of videos back. They're not always. They usually always have a purpose. It's like the Chekhovian slogan of if you're going to have a gun on the wall in the first act, it better go off in the third. You know, so he's setting things up the whole time, and you particularly have to do that if you're writing a detective novel. You have to be very careful about how you're constructing this. And again, it has to be said, this was another put together job based on little, as he called them, novelettes published in the 30s in the pulps. So this was another put together story. And the next one will be the last one of those cannibalized stories that he made a novel out of, The Lady in the Lake. Then his last three novels, they were originals, as it were.
There's another character, you know, he does have motifs connected with characters because I remember it was either in The High Window. It might be in The Lady in the Lake, which I've been reading, and I'm deeply into that, so I confuse some of them. But there was one of the police department guys. He would always light his cigarette the same way and cup the flame this way, and he had a whole routine on doing the cigarette, and you get that 3 or 4 times.
It's this one. It's Jesse Breeze. It's Jesse Breeze in The High Window who does
There
it.
you go. There's a motif
Right.
to him that
Right.
keeps returning.
Right.
And
Yeah.
the purpose of the leitmotif technique, whether in a Wagnerian opera slash music drama or in a Thomas Mann novel or a Chandler novel, the purpose of it is to embed that character or that phenomena in your mind as a reader and have it come back each time. And the more it comes back, the more it becomes embedded in your psyche as a reader or a viewer.
And it's a character tell too. You know, he's a cop. He's one of those methodical cops. One thing after the next.
There you go.
Get yourself comfortable. We got as long as it takes, palsy. You know, we're gonna interrogate you here, and you're gonna answer questions, you know, the way we want them, and no other way, and you know, this sort of thing. So it bespeaks a great deal of intimidating confidence, and the fact that you have the law at your back. You know, this sort of relaxed kind of demeanor. I'm going to smoke my cigar. I'm going to take my time, and you're going to be waiting patiently, aren't you? So it's in this Jesse Breeze character. He's one of a whole series of cops we run across in the various novels. They change from one novel to the next pretty much. I think Bernie Olds from The Big Sleep makes an appearance. Is it in The Lady in the Lake or later? But they usually are new characters, and which is unlike Sherlock Holmes, for example, where you have Lestrade and let's see, was it Gregorius or something? Gregory, yeah, Gregory, the two inept policemen from Scotland Yard, right? Chandler's cops are never inept. That's the important thing. I mean, because they always bring in Sherlock Holmes on a case because these stupid, you know, Scotland Yard types can't solve it. But these LA cops or
Bay
Bay
City.
City cops, they're never stupid, and they're very capable at what they do. Right? They're
Okay.
very capable at what they do. They're not as free form as a private gumshoe can be by definition, right? he's working privately. He's not a public servant, but they're always very, they're no slouches. They're no doormats. And every novel, even 2 or 3 times in each novel, he goes right up against the cops. It's a real butting of heads. And in this 4th novel, Lady in the Lake, I don't know how far you are in it already, but that's where a cop plays a real heavy role, heavy in the twofold sense.
Okay, Kev, you're bringing us to our next novel for next week, but we've only got a few minutes left here. Would you like to have any final
Yeah,
thoughts on the high
yeah.
window?
This has always bothered me, or maybe a better word would be intrigued me. Now we all know that Marlowe, we encounter this in The Big Sleep, that Marlowe, he plays chess games with himself, right? Which I have done, by the way. It's kind of fun. You know, you test yourself against the masters. And this is the final page. And he gets done talking to, I think it is Jesse Breeze, in fact. Is it? Whatever it is. Anyway, he goes home. And let me get to it. Sorry, folks. Yeah, he gets done talking to Jesse Breeze, walks out of his office, goes home. It was night. I went home and put my old house clothes on and set the chessmen out and mixed a drink and played over another Capablanca. Capablanca was a great chess player of the interwar period, I believe. It went 59 moves. Beautiful, cold, remorseless chess, almost creepy in its silent implacability. When it was done, I listened at the open window for a while and smelled the night. Then I carried my glass out to the kitchen and rinsed it and filled it with ice water and stood at the sink sipping it and looking at my face in the mirror. You in Capablanca, I said. Now, what does that final line mean?
He's saying that he is just as silently cold and implacable in his discovery of clues and pursuing a case as Capablanca is as a chess player.
One interpretation, I buy it, I like it, but it's not enough for me. I think it's that after having gone through all this, these 3-4 days of murder, mayhem, love, hate, jealousy, blackmail, intrigue, here he is alone. Not even
Well,
Capablanca's there.
I think Kev,
so it's like this poignant little moment where Marlowe is back to his natural state, a loner, alone in his apartment, waiting for the next case. I think there's a tinge of that. You could basically be right, but I think I would hope there's a tinge of that there, because I think it makes it a little bit more poignant.
I think that ending resonates on various levels.
Of course. Yeah.
There's probably a couple more.
We're trying to sound them out now.
Yeah, yeah. It's a great ending, by the way.
Oh, I love it. It's actually, it's probably my favorite ending, even beyond The Big Sleep, and that's why I chose to read it here. It's yeah. I mean, another reading of it would be you and Capablanca, not only cold, remorseless masterminds of the chessboard, and Marlowe of the human drama, but here you are playing chess against someone who's not even there. So it's like this. It's almost a self ridiculing sort of passage where he's saying, who do you think you are? You know, you're just here playing chess with yourself. You know, it's sort of a self-denigrating statement. It's not only a
Right.
poignant one with you're alone here, you know, you in Capablanca, but it's like, who do you think you are? You know, you think you're some big mastermind, but here you are with your, you know, I don't know. I'm babbling at this point, but I would like to give it a third level, and I
Okay.
don't think I'm quite able to do so. But anyway,
All right, Kev. Well, listen, either, no matter how you slice it, a wonderful way to end the novel and a wonderful way to end our talk today. So we're pretty much done here. We'll say farewell, my brother, as you said to me last time we did these videos, and we'll prepare next week for The Lady in the Lake. Okay?
very good. Until
All
then,
right. See you later.
see you later. Bye bye.